Hi, everyone. I'm Elaine Quijano. Thank you for joining us. Tonight's sixth Democratic presidential debate saw the smallest number of candidates take the debate stage, but some of the biggest fights between candidates. 7 presidential hopefuls took the stage in Los Angeles just one day after the House of Representatives voted to impeach President Trump. That was the first topic of the night. While some wanted to focus less on the process of impeachment, they all slammed President Trump's actions. The candidates also took on topics that have become familiar in the Democratic race, like climate change, immigration, Middle East peace, and debates over increasing taxes on the wealthy. And while there were a number of issues they appeared to agree on, there were also sharp criticisms among candidates over fundraising and donors, so-called purity tests. Here's some of the key moments of the night.
If the president claims that he is so innocent, then why doesn't he have all the president's men testify?
The court that counts here is the court of public opinion. The American people deserve to see the truth.
Stop being obsessed over impeachment, which unfortunately strikes many Americans like a ball game where you know what the score is going to be, and start actually digging in and solving the problems that got Donald Trump elected in the first place.
How do you answer top economists who say taxes of this magnitude would stifle growth and investment?
Oh, they're just wrong.
Senator, with all respect, this question is about race. Can you answer the question as it was asked?
People of color, in fact, are going to be the people suffering most if we do not deal with climate change.
No, I'm not willing to commit one way or another. Here's the deal. I'm not even elected one term yet, and let's see where we are. Let's see what happens.
Senator Warren, you would be the oldest president ever inaugurated. I'd like you to weigh in as well.
I'd also be the youngest woman ever inaugurated.
We have to stop confusing economic value and human value. We have to be able to say to our kids and Kyle that you have intrinsic value because you're an American and you're a human being.
Billionaires in wine caves should not pick the next president of the United States.
Senator, your net worth is 100 times mine.
Get used to it. This is a nation of immigrants. That's who we are. That's why we're who we are. That's what makes us different.
If you want to talk about the capacity to win, try putting together a coalition to bring you back to office with 80% of the vote as a gay dude in Mike Pence's Indiana.
Trump thinks mistakenly that he is going to win re-election by dividing us up. We are going to win this election by bringing our people together. Black and white and Latino, Native American, Asian American. That's what America must be about.
Let's go to the spin room now, where our CBSN political reporter Caitlin Huey-Burns is standing by. All right, Caitlin, so there was a lot of territory covered tonight. What stood out to you?
Yeah, Elaine, I wish that they were handing out popcorn as snacks tonight. They didn't, but I really wanted some during this exchange between Amy Klobuchar and Pete Buttigieg. We knew that Pete Buttigieg was going to have a target on his back tonight. He's been gaining ground, especially in Iowa, and a lot of his fellow contenders felt the need to go after him. But look, we're just a few weeks away, really, from voters weighing in Iowa, and Amy Klobuchar is one of those candidates that has been trying to gain some momentum there, and you saw her take those direct shots at Pete Buttigieg and try to, appeal as a more moderate force in this party, that he's not the only one, and appeal to a place like Iowa. You also saw some tense exchanges between Elizabeth Warren and Pete Buttigieg. They have been at each other for the past few weeks now, and we saw a shift from Elizabeth Warren. On the debate stages in the past, she hasn't gone after her rivals. She's tried to kind of remain above the fray, but you saw her evoke that wine cave fundraiser. And I think that was a significant movement on her part. But Pete Buttigieg kind of knew that this debate would really focus on him, and he seemed prepared for a lot of those attacks. I think these kinds of moments help to benefit someone like Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders, who have been letting their close competitors kind of duke it out amongst each other and continue to just focus on their own campaigns.
So, Caitlin, was this a make-or-break event for any of the candidates on that stage tonight?
well, there were fewer candidates than we've seen before, even though 7 is still a lot. But we saw them really engage in actual debate. I think the questions from the moderators were different than we've seen in past debates and kind of challenged them to think about things a little bit differently. I think someone like Amy Klobuchar had a really good night tonight because she did kind of what she came here to do, which is establish herself as a real player in this primary field. And this is when, these candidates know it's really crunch time. The holiday is coming up. They know that some of them, Amy Klobuchar included, are going to have to spend much of January back in Washington dealing with impeachment proceedings. And so this was a chance for her especially to kind of establish some footing here. I also think Andrew Yang also gained some ground in this debate as well, and kind of, you can see why he's been attracting a lot of support in this race.
All right, Caitlin Huey-Burns for us. Caitlin, thank you very much. I want to bring in my panel here on set, Leslie Sanchez, Molly Hooper, and Antjuan Seawright. Leslie is a CBS News political contributor and Republican strategist. Antjuan is a CBS News political contributor and Democratic strategist. And Molly is a CBSN political contributor. Welcome to you all. All right, so let's talk impeachment. Let's go ahead, before we get into the discussion, listen to Mayor Pete Buttigieg's assessment of this.
But here's the good news. It's up to us. No matter what happens in the Senate, it is up to us in 2020. This is our chance to refuse to be taken in by the helplessness, to refuse and reject the cynicism. That is what this presidential election is about. It is what my campaign is about. Our opportunity in 2020, no matter what happens in Washington, as a country, to change the course of this nation for the better.
So, Antjuan, how else did we hear Democrats navigate this topic of impeachment on the stage?
I think Andrew Yang probably had the best answer when it came to impeachment, when he said people treat it like a sports game.
Do we have that sound, by the way, SOT 6, I believe it is, control room? If we do, we should play it.
Yeah, we should.
Because then we can talk about it, because he took a decidedly sort of different tack, I think, maybe perhaps than others might have expected, right?
I think he took the right approach, because at the end of the day, I don't think anyone's going to show up to a primary or a caucus at any point next year voting for either one of these candidates based on how they feel about impeachment, because I think the die has been cast.
So let's go ahead and listen. I'm going to pause you right there for just a moment, but this is what Andrew Yang said very early on about the topic of impeachment.
But Americans around the country know different. We blasted away 4 million manufacturing jobs that were primarily based in Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Missouri. I just left Iowa. We blasted 40,000 manufacturing jobs there. The more we act like Donald Trump is the cause of all of our problems, the more Americans lose trust that we can actually see what's going on in our communities and solve those problems. What we have to do is we have to stop being obsessed over impeachment, which unfortunately strikes many Americans like a ball game where you know what the score is going to be, and start actually digging in and solving the problems that got Donald Trump elected in the first place. We have to take every opportunity to present a new positive vision for the country, a new way forward to help beat him in 2020, because make no mistake, he'll be there at the ballot box for us to defeat.
All right, so Antjuan, from your perspective as a Democratic strategist, that seems to be a thing that will resonate with people.
I think so, because again, impeachment doesn't keep people up at night, and it doesn't keep people sweating during the day when they're at work because they can't figure out how to solve last night's problems. But I think he did a great job. He did the old Mike Tyson jab and go. He jabbed at impeachment, and he went on to talk about the things that do keep people up at night, and that's jobs, quality of life things. And I think that's what people are focused on. Those are the things that most people agree in my party that the Republicans have failed the country on, i.e. the leader of the free world. And I think he did a great job of talking about the things that matter. And we've got to get back into the business of talking about the things that matter and not just talking about the failures of Donald Trump and the Republican Party.
So President Trump was weighing in on Twitter about impeachment. During the debate, he tweeted about the potential delay of a Senate trial, claiming it's because Democrats don't want the whistleblower or the Bidens to testify. So did anyone have strong enough messaging to compete with the president's strategy tonight? What's your take on that, Leslie?
compete in the terms of like who's getting the most play, you know, kind of most response?
Yeah, right. Because, you know, the president obviously has the biggest megaphone via his Twitter account especially.
It's kind of like what we talked about earlier in the night, two different strategies, right? On one sense, the president's going to talk about what his accolades, his strong attributes, the historically low unemployment, especially for communities of color, high economic numbers, especially in those swing states and kind of on the country, the sentiment of the country overall, and even his higher approval rating, which is kind of shocking in comparison. Then there's the issue of impeachment, which is that galvanizing issue. So he's going to stay on message. It's kind of like that two-step process. It's a Texas two-step, as I would call it. You know, like he's just moving along. You know, I'm hanging around Antjuan
I know.
so long that now now it's my
your Texan
roots is coming out.
Yeah.
But that's what you would expect with him. I think the interesting part about Andrew Yang, he said it was the elephant in the room. You can't keep talking about impeachment because we kind of know the answer already. It's preordained. It's like inevitable, which is what Republicans have been saying, that it wasn't a fair process. By virtue of saying that we already know what the outcome is, he can make the case on the right and the left. They're saying that we know what Republicans are going to do. I take it as we know what Democrats are going to do. It's never fair.
I just thought that Biden actually had a pretty good answer when asked what I would think is a very important question, especially covering Capitol Hill. What's going to happen afterwards? You know, what about the aftermath of this? Will this polarization come back to some moderation? Will that happen? And Biden's like, listen, if anybody up here has the right to be upset about this, it's me, because he has brought my name into this, my son's name into this, and he's like, but you know what? At the end of the day, we got to be the bigger party, and you just have to move forward, essentially. And I don't have the exact quote here, but essentially get over it and move on for the best of the country.
I think the vice president did a great job of turning some tragedy into triumph for him. You asked Leslie the question about the messaging that could compete with Donald Trump. I think Joe Biden was singing the right hymn when he talked about how the economy is working for some, but it's not working for others. And he specifically pointed to middle-class working families, who arguably is a constituency that Donald Trump was able to snatch from Democrats in the 2016 election, but that has not worked out so well for them. That's why we were able to chip away at that constituency in 18. And Biden understands for us to be successful in 20, we have to communicate the issues and the failures of the president and talk about what we can do to bring them back in. And he did that. So he did that. He also, I think, did a great job of talking about how most of the country wants a leader who can bring this country back together, to your point. And what better person is known on that debate stage other than Amy Klobuchar would be Joe Biden, that people respect on both sides of the aisle.
All right, Leslie, Antjuan, Molly, thank you so much. Let's go now to the spin room, where Caitlin and Ed O'Keefe are standing by with Tom Steyer. Ed?
Elaine, thank you. Hello from Los Angeles. We're here with Tom Steyer, who was telling us about his tie. What is it, that one month a year?
1 month a year, people think that a red plaid tie is really in season.
Yeah.
The other 11, they just think I'm poorly dressed.
Good to see you. Thank you. We're in your home state, of course. You're the only Californian on stage tonight. What did you make of tonight's exchange?
Look, I think that tonight had a series of, attacks between people on the stage. And to me, the most important thing that we should all be focusing on, which I kept trying to say, is we need to beat Donald Trump. And I believe he's told us last week how he's going to run. He's going to run on the economy, and he's going to say that Democrats are a bunch of socialists who will destroy this economy in 15 minutes. That's a quote. So, in fact, if we're going to beat Donald Trump, we're going to have to go after him. We're going to have a candidate who can go toe-to-toe with him on the economy, on prosperity and growth, and beat him. And look, I spent 30 years in the private sector. I built a company from scratch. I can talk about prosperity, and I can expose him because he's a fake businessman. He's a failure as a businessman, and he's been a terrible steward of the American economy for the people of America. So, as far as I'm concerned tonight, we need to focus on beating Trump, not beating each other.
You were one of the earliest to call for impeachment. The House, you've been talking about it for the past couple of years. The House passed articles of impeachment, but they haven't yet said to the Senate.
Right.
Is that an issue? Is that a concern? Are you concerned that it's not going to make it? What is your...
No, I think that what Speaker Pelosi is trying to do
is to hold it up to try and ensure that the Senate does some form of a fair trial and puts the evidence in front of the American people. So I think she's actually using her parliamentary power and skill to try and ensure that Mitch McConnell does not do what he said he's going to do, which is break his oath to the Constitution, break his oath to the American people, and basically put the Republican Party and President Trump ahead of America.
Why do you think Americans are still so divided on impeachment pretty evenly? You've been talking about it for 2 years. We've had open proceedings in Congress. Everybody's been able to assess this information, but still they're divided. Why is that?
You know, let me say this. I'm not sure I agree with your premise. What we've seen is an administration and a president that has obstructed justice. He's refused to allow any members or former members of his administration to go in front of Congress and under oath tell the truth. So in fact, we haven't had the full televised hearings where the truth will come out, which I've been pushing for and need to impeach for over 2 years. If you compare it to President Nixon in 1974, every one of his top administration officials went in front of the Senate Watergate Committee, testified on TV to the American people, and we could make up our own mind. That's exactly what President Trump has refused to allow. He has obstructed justice in the most obvious way in a trial that's partly about the obstruction of justice.
Real quick before we let you go, I had a conversation with one of these House Democratic freshmen who won election last year, who said to me last week, they know that they're now anticipating a barrage of attack ads from various Republican groups because this member voted for impeachment. And kind of jokingly, but half seriously, this member suggested that perhaps you, given that you started the Need to Impeach group, should personally be donating now some of your fortune instead of to your presidential campaign, but perhaps to the re-election campaign of those Democrats, especially from the Trump districts, who voted for impeachment are now going to face the attack.
You'd be happy to know that in 2018, the organization I started, Next Gen America, did the largest youth voter mobilization in American history. So I don't know who you're talking about, but we went into 38 districts and more than doubled the turnout of young people in those districts, and 33 of them flipped to Democrat. Right. So in fact, when people say, oh, Tom, you should be working at the grassroots to support Democrats, oh, by the way, I did, and I'm doing it.
Well, there's no disputing you did. And the point was, what will they do? What will he do for us in 2020?
I have said from the beginning that I'm going to continue everything Next Gen does in terms of youth voter mobilization, that I'm going to continue the organization that Next Gen started with which is called For Our Future, with 7 national labor unions, going door to door. We've hit over 25 million doors together in the last 2 election cycles. So when people say, oh, Tom, you should be working at the grassroots, the answer is, I started one of the biggest grassroots organizations in the United States. In fact, if you look at 2018, the reason Democrats did well was the turnout of Democratic voters. That's what I believe in. That's what I'm going to do in 2020, come hell or high water.
We will see you again in January on the trail. Have a happy holiday season, Mr. Steyer. Tom Steyer. Elaine, we've hit the saturation point where some of Mr. Steyer's rivals are now in our midst, and so we will attempt to pick them off as they come. Let me see if she's available. Senator Klobuchar is making her way towards us. Another chaotic spin room in another city. Klobuchar had a pretty good night. I think we would agree in effectively sort of turning the conversation in her direction and making a few salient points. Senator Klobuchar, good to see you. How are you?
I'm good.
Thanks for being with us again. At times it seemed like you were playing mom up there, trying to keep the children in line.
Well, there was a little bit of that, and I think that is because I look at this as such a moment of unity that we have to bring people together. And I have legitimate friendships with people like Bernie Sanders, and, you know, I think that's going to be helpful. So part of my role, while I have very different political views than he does, is to remember that in the end, what unites us is bigger than what divides us, that we have to take the fight to Donald Trump.
But you did try a few times to draw contrast, especially with Mayor Buttigieg. Why do you feel the need to do that?
I did, and I thought that was such an important factor about people's experience, and we haven't talked about it enough on the stage. And at the last debate, he said something about, oh, look at what the 100 years of experience up on this stage, what has it given you? And it never got answered because I didn't have that chance. So I've been waiting for a month, Ed, and I was able to do that and explain all what people had done up on that stage. I think it matters. We've got a guy in the White House that went in there with no political experience at all. People are looking for someone to heal this nation and bring people together. So that factor that you can get things done, I think it really matters.
Strategically, though, he is in your way in Iowa, so there is a need to kind of try to surpass him, right?
Well, no. The way I look at it is this: yes, he right now is doing well in Iowa, but so am I. As I got in a text message from someone the other day that had an autocorrect problem, congratulations on your insurgency in Iowa. They meant surge, because we're now up to 10 points. We have basically doubled our offices, added staff daily, and I think that's an important factor. And when you look in American history, the person leading at this moment in time, at this moment in December, is not the person that won, and not the person that actually became president. Barack Obama wasn't leading at this moment in time. Bill Clinton, Jimmy Carter. And so my issue, of course, is that people don't know me as well across the country. So every debate matters for me. And of course, I'm going to make a contrast with someone who is vying with me for support in these states. That's what debates are for. The question is not that you make those contrasts, it's how you deal with people, and I think I do a pretty good job of that.
One thing that could blunt your momentum, of course, is this impeachment trial if you're drawn back to Washington. You told us last month at the last debate, you'll be there, you'll fulfill your constitutional duty, and your husband and daughter will be put to full use, especially in Iowa, on your behalf. This whole back and forth now, though, about potentially withholding the articles of impeachment until there's some sense of a fair format. Wouldn't jurors like yourself prefer that this get over with as fast as possible?
I was literally in a closed-door meeting. I know you'd like to hear about that, with Senator Schumer. I'm not going to go in the details, but I am in leadership in the Senate. I was the only one on that presidential stage in that meeting, and we discussed timing. And I was a fierce advocate for doing whatever it took to get a trial and to make sure that we had witnesses, as I pointed on the stage, like Mulvaney, like Bolton. Bolton told his own staff, under oath people have said this, to go get a lawyer and that the president was treating this like a drug deal. Yeah, I think we should hear from him. And in fact, if the president claims they will exonerate him, let's hear from them. So my point is that I'm not going to let this campaign get in the way of my duty and obligation as a juror in that very important proceeding. And whatever, the chips will fall where they may. I think the people of this country will appreciate that. I think the people in those 4 early states that are following this pretty carefully, I think they're going to understand. And I have the most endorsements of anyone on that stage in the state of Iowa for electeds and former electeds. That makes a big difference.
So you head to Iowa tomorrow?
I head to Iowa tomorrow on a 27-county tour. Now, let me be honest, Ed. Maybe if the impeachment proceeding wasn't there, I would not be doing 23, 27 counties in 3 days, but such is life. And I just will double down on my work. That's what I've always done. I'm a mom. I can do 2 things at once.
And are you spending Christmas in Waterloo, or will you go back to Minnesota?
No, I'm going to be in Minnesota with my family, and my dad is there, my husband's family, and so we will be together, and we will have that day to ourselves, yes.
Senator, thank you for stopping by. Safe travels.
Right.
We'll see you again soon.
You.
Elaine, we are awaiting some others, contenders here, and as you saw there, Senator Klobuchar making the case that, yes, she did have to go after Pete Buttigieg. Caitlin should come back and join us here because I think we're
rounding up another candidate in sight, Ed. Caitlin, you guys see somebody else there?
Did the Yang gang move on, or?
Right. So as
Yang is coming. Okay.
Oh, there we go.
Hello again. How are you?
Yes.
Interesting, though, Elaine, that Klobuchar conceded there pretty publicly that, yes, she has to do something to blunt Buttigieg's momentum, and that he essentially stands in her way. And so she, despite calling for a little more unity, did have to try to get some business done tonight by raising questions about him. And she seemed pretty pleased with what she was able to pull off.
You know, it was interesting, that last question that they were asked about what you would apologize for. Did you notice only two of the women that were on this stage apologized? She was one of them. So that's kind of something interesting that we're seeing kind of play out on social media a lot.
And one guy who suggested he'd give out a gift is Andrew Yang, who is en route now.
Right here. Hello.
join Caitlin
Yes,
and I
we see
here in a
him
moment.
there.
Hello, team.
Hello, how are you?
Good to see you all.
Good to see you again. How are you?
Good to see you, too.
So, a big topic of discussion today was about fundraisers in the Democratic Party right now. You do not have open fundraisers to the press yet. When are you going to open those up? Can you give us kind of a timeline?
You know what's funny is my team told me I should assume that every fundraiser is public record, and every event I've done, someone's had a smartphone on, actually more like a dozen. So any journalist who wants to see what was going on could just go on Instagram and see it. Our events have been, well, like we've had no rules about like you can record this, you can't record that. People have recorded every inch of every event we've done. So if you want to go back into the memory bank and find all of my events, you're going to get a little bit bored because my remarks are kind of similar. But yeah, they've been open the whole time, and we have no problem opening them to the press.
Another issue that came up today was this issue, and you've talked a little bit about this, but this issue of kind of litmus tests, the idea that Democrats early on have been kind of establishing these, barriers for entry. We've seen them on Medicare for All, Green New Deal, fundraisers, raise the way that you raise money. Has that been prohibitive, do you think, to Democrats? Is that something that concerns you?
No, I think Americans are really smart. They know what issues are make or break and then what issues that some people could differ on. The fact is, our campaign finance system is broken and overrun with corporate money, and it's very, very hard for someone to run and win without having to make some really difficult compromises in many, many situations. I have not had to do that. Thank you, Yang Gang. Really appreciate it. But I don't begrudge people who found themselves in that position because our system is so messed up and so overrun with corporate money.
There has been some initial early observations that given that you were the only minority on stage, the conversation about virtually every issue was sort of conducted more at a 40,000-foot level, especially on issues of the economy and immigration. Whereas when you've been on stage with people like Senator Harris and Senator Booker and Secretary Castro, the conversation's perhaps been a little more urgent, personal, and driven by experience that a lot of these other candidates don't have. And I'm just curious if you thought that the texture and flavor of tonight was perhaps different given the lack of diversity on stage.
I think it may have been, and it's true. You talk about something differently if you've experienced it directly or you have not. Certainly, I was both honored and disappointed to be the lone candidate of color. I think having Corey back will be a good thing in the next debate, which I believe will happen. And it's something that I know many people in the Democratic Party are taking very seriously.
How does that happen? How does he get back on stage?
Well, I think I just saw he just hit a really great poll number in an official poll. And so as long as the DNC doesn't do something bananas with the threshold, like it looks like he's on track to make it.
You also mentioned at one point that that you had visited or you have family in Hong Kong?
Yeah. I spent a semester in Hong Kong in college, and I still have family members there.
So you haven't been in recent years, but you were there when you were in college?
I was there maybe like 2 or 3 years ago. There wasn't any violence at that time. But I'm familiar with the city, and seeing what's happening is shocking.
You've talked a lot about your family and your son, and we've seen your wife out with you on the campaign trail more, seeing more of your family. What has that kind of meant to you? I mean, this is a new process for your entire family.
I am so grateful to my wife, Evelyn, for being the rock that's kept our family strong and whole while I've been on the road 5 days a week for the last number of months. And I'm even more thrilled that now she's here with me on the trail sometimes. We have all of these family that have converged to distract our kids, frankly, so that she can, sneak out and join me on the trail for a few days. And it's a godsend because I felt terrible being away from family, and with Evelyn here, it feels like, the family's together.
Are you spending Christmas in any of the early states?
One fun thing about the holidays, as far as I can tell, voters do not want to hear from you during the Christmas holiday.
Amen.
And so if I were to show up in Iowa, they'd be like, do you have no family of your own? And so it looks like we're going to be spending time together as a family next week.
Well, I'm sure your family and reporters alike appreciate that.
And the voters.
Give the reporters a break. Give the voters a break.
Well, thanks for swinging by again, as you always do. You're always generous with your time. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays to you both.
Good to see you.
We'll see you come the new year.
So great to see you.
Out on the trail.
Holidays, America. Don't pay attention to politics for at least a couple of days.
Tell our bosses that. That would be helpful.
That's a 2020 bumper sticker if I ever heard
Elaine,
it. Thank you so
hang
much.
with us here a second, because we normally reserve this venue and this time for presidential contenders, but we're going to make an exception for the governor of the nation's largest state, Gavin Newsom, who is here tonight. Governor, good to see you, sir. Ed O'Keefe with CBSN.
Hi, Governor. Caitlin Huey-Burns,
You're
CBS.
joining us live on CBSN,
All right.
our 24/7 network.
24/7.
Great
Can't
to
get
see
rid of
you.
you. What do we do?
What did you make of tonight?
I thought it was healthy. Look, when you sit in the audience as a Democrat, you want to see everybody get along all the time. But that's the nature of debates, and I think we go through this iteration, we go through this process every election where people say, will we ever unify as a party? And invariably, we always do unify. And so I feel good about things, and I felt really good about tonight.
So California has traditionally been a place where Democrats come to fundraise, but now, as we've been talking about all night, it is a key early state of early voting.
They're still coming to fundraise.
And then they're still coming to fundraise.
Sure.
But how have you seen kind of voters assess these candidates? Are they paying attention, or do you think they're going to kind of wait till Iowa and New Hampshire figure it out and then start thinking about this?
What's, I think, interesting about this crop is the familiarity with most of these candidates. We go back years and years. Californians are very engaged politically. Obviously, Bernie Sanders has deep roots here. Joe Biden, obviously, deep admiration roots. Elizabeth Warren. I mean, you go down that list. Tom Steyer from California, former candidate, Senator Harris. So you have already a deep base of recognition. I think what California, because of the scope and size and scale of the state as a nation state, I think not surprisingly, that momentum from those early states will still play an outsized role of what happens here. That doesn't mean you should just wait things out and do well in Iowa or New Hampshire, but I do think that will be disproportionately determinative in terms of the fate of whoever ultimately prevails in the state.
You were about to board a flight to Iowa when your state's junior senator dropped out of this
You ain't
race.
kidding. And I listened to it online and found out she dropped out.
And are you, at this point, withholding an endorsement, or will you jump in ahead of your state's
I don't
primary?
know if I'm withholding anything, because that assumes I have something to withhold.
Well, you don't think an endorsement from you would help?
I don't know that it matters. You know what? I think endorsements matter when you don't have them. I think when it comes to candidates, it's so personal for us. It's nice to have an endorsement, but you say to your friends, I got this. I'm able to size that person up. I think endorsements matter more to propositions and initiatives where people don't necessarily understand the details. So it's a nice thing to have, but let us be humble that our endorsements aren't that significant. And it's very sweet to have people reach out to you, but I don't think anyone's going to lose any sleep wondering where I am in this race.
And you have heard from the rest of them asking for your help.
I may have heard one or two.
Only one or two?
5. How many were there? 7? No, 6 out of the 7. One
Let's
hasn't.
point them out in the crowd.
Who was that one that didn't come?
Can I ask you one sort of state issue?
Please.
The USMCA was passed today in Washington. As we heard tonight, a pretty healthy exchange about the pros and cons of that deal. What does that do for California, and what do you make of the deal as you understand it, given the state's disproportionate reliance on global trade?
I mean, quite literally, no state's more impacted, I think, benefited from the newly negotiated terms of the new NAFTA. And I mean it, obviously I'm partisan, so forgive my subjectivity, but had Nancy Pelosi not intervened with her team to strengthen the labor provisions, the environmental provisions, it would not have been something I supported. So because of her leadership, they had to bend. Trump went much further than he otherwise would because he wanted a victory on the map, and that ultimately is a victory for California, big ag state, the biggest ag state in the country, but also as a gateway state to Asia, these tariffs, this trade war beyond just the issues of trade to Mexico and Canada into China and Asia broadly is impacting the states, holding back our extraordinary growth. I can only imagine economically where California would be, and we are on top. 20% of America's jobs are coming from the state, record surpluses, bond ratings are being increased, so we're really excited about this.
And just finally, because we've been talking about impeachment all week, is this something that you know, as you're out in your communities in California, is this something people are talking about and care about?
Yeah,
is this something that candidates should be talking about when they come and campaign here?
people want to know where you were. People want accountability. So absolutely, if you weren't willing to hold someone to account, then I think it's a huge issue. But it's table stakes now. All right, where were you? Good. Now let's talk about education, healthcare. Let's talk about environment, where you are, and the issues of cost of living, et cetera. But I do think we dismiss it too quickly. It's not the first thing people say, but trust me, when you walk in the room, they want to know. They either already know, or they're going to seek to find out where you are as a proxy for your values and who you are, so they start listening to you on other issues. So I do think it matters.
And finally, do you look around a room like this and think one day you'd like to be one of these guys being chased around by us?
Why would you want to go through that? I mean, what human being? I think it's early childhood trauma. That must be the issue. A deep need to seek affirmation. There's something about this that is curious at best.
But as a popular governor of the nation's largest and most democratic state, you don't think about this?
It's tough. This is a divided time where everybody's talking past each other, down to each other. I hope we can get through this, but that's why we need a new president. But our politics right now is toxic, and it is not, it's not for the weak or sheepish. I applaud all these folks for their courage to put themselves out. I mean, Axelrod was right. This is legitimately an MRI for the soul. And anyone that wants to put themselves out there, deep, mad respect. I'm not sure I'm on that list.
All right. Well, Governor, thank you for stopping by. We appreciate it.
Good to see you.
Thanks for having us in your state.
Thanks for being here.
Elaine, the governor of California, who claims he doesn't want to run for president one day. That's not what we've heard.
Yeah.
But
we've heard people
whatever.
change their minds before.
Well, we have the
we're
tape
happy
now.
to come to California as much as possible to investigate.
Right. Yes.
So,
We're
yeah.
happy to come back.
Okay, all right. Duly noted. All right, Ed O'Keefe and Caitlin Huey-Burns, thank you so much. We'll let you get back to wrangling some more candidates. Thanks. Let's check back in with our panel here. We've got Leslie Sanchez, Antjuan Seawright, Molly Hooper. Let's talk about health care, because during the debate, right, this is something that a lot of folks really wanted to hear about. And I want to play in particular an exchange between Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders about the cost of Medicare for all. Let's listen to that.
It costs $30 trillion. Let's get that straight. $30 trillion over 10 years. Some say it costs $20 trillion. Some say it costs $40. The idea that you're going to be able to save that person making $60,000 a year on Medicare for all is absolutely preposterous. 16% of the American public is on Medicare now, and everybody has a tax taken out of their paycheck now. Tell me, you're going to add 84% more, and there's not going to be higher taxes? At least before he was honest about it.
Oh, Joe.
It's going to increase personal taxes. They're going to be...
That's right. We are going to increase personal taxes. Okay. But we're eliminating premiums. We're eliminating co-payments. We're eliminating deductibles. We're eliminating all out-of-pocket expenses. And no family in America will spend more than $200 a year on prescription drugs.
All right. So, Antjuan, let me turn to you. This is something that we've talked about time and time again as being a top priority for Democratic voters in particular. We see the contrast here. Did this move that debate forward for people who are really seriously looking at that as a main issue for them to vote on?
Let me step back for a second. As we figure out who we are and what we want to be when we grow up, Democrats, healthcare will be a defining issue in this election. I do believe in my heart it will be a defining issue for the 2020 general election. There's no issue, polls on the left and the polls on the right, that polls higher as a priority than healthcare in this country. It was that way in 2018. 2020 will not be any different. I think tonight's battle and most of these debates have been a battle between what's progressive, what's centrist, what's pragmatic. We saw those two things clash together tonight. I think at the end of the day, the pragmatic approach to fixing healthcare is not only more popular when it comes to surveys and polls, but it's more popular on the debate stage of making the case of what we need to do to go forward to fix a broken healthcare system. And it's going to be an ongoing debate. But I remind my more progressive friends on this issue, Barack Obama had a Democratic Senate and a Democratic House and could not pass a public option. The president is the executive. The legislative branch still has their duties and responsibilities. And so who knows how the two bodies are going to play out, but what we do know is that it's going to take legislative action to move any healthcare plan forward. And based on the courts.
Well, exactly, the courts.
Based on the courts, they're loaded up with Leslie's folks. They're not going to side. I'm joking. They're not going to side. They're not going to side on the right side of history when it comes to the approach we think it takes to fix health care.
Well, I mean, the Fifth Court just ruled yesterday that the individual mandate is unconstitutional. Now that goes back to the lower courts. But still, it sort of sets the issue into limbo, and you're right, it just propels it forward to 2020 from an issue that was already at the top of voters' minds to an issue that is imperative at this point.
Right. All right. Let's get a view from the campaign trail. And I want to bring in CBS News 2020 campaign reporter Kara Cordy. She is in Los Angeles at a debate watch party for Senator Bernie Sanders. Kara, thanks so much for being with us. So how are supporters of Senator Sanders reacting to tonight's debate?
Well, perhaps no surprise, Elaine. All of Sanders' supporters here loved basically every word that he said. They particularly loved exchanges on climate change. That moment when Sanders redirected the conversation to climate, they were really, really robustly applauding that. But what they really loved was when Sanders stuck up for himself and his policies, when he called out Vice President Biden and Mayor Pete Buttigieg on campaign fundraising. The place went wild. When he even said that he made a mistake on his vote to proceed in the war in Afghanistan, they applauded that. So various moments for the Sanders campaign tonight. CBS News calculated that Senator Sanders actually had the most speaking time tonight, and his supporters were loving every bit of it.
And you know, Kara, I'm just curious. I read in one of your earlier notes from the evening that there were some pretty forceful reactions, not just to Senator Sanders, but at various points with some of the other candidates, including Mayor Pete Buttigieg. Tell us about that.
Yes, we know that Bernie Sanders was the most popular man in the room tonight. One of the most unpopular was Mayor Buttigieg. Members in the audience, whenever he would speak, would boo him, or they would cry out, "What do you know about our struggle?" Or someone even cried out at one point that he was in the CIA, referring to some of his more veiled work working for the McKinsey firm in Washington. So certainly the Sanders supporters no love lost between Sanders and Mayor Buttigieg.
All right, Kara Cordy. Kara, thank you so much. Let's bring in CBS News 2020 campaign reporter Adam Brewster. He is at his perch in Des Moines, Iowa. So, Adam, I know you've been following Senator Cory Booker as he campaigns there in that state. This was the first debate he did not qualify for. What did he say about that tonight?
So, Elaine, he spent the first debate night that he wasn't on doing a little phone banking in Iowa before he kicks off his 4-day bus tour tomorrow. He kind of spoke briefly to the supporters and volunteers who were there, saying he feels good about where he stands in the race. He feels he's seeing, boosts in momentum and better fundraising numbers. He got on the phone and made some calls, and one person who he was speaking to, he talked to for about 10 minutes and said, "Hey, this isn't over until Iowa votes." Afterwards, he talked to reporters, and reporters asked him, what did it mean not being on the stage tonight? And he was pretty candid and said he was frustrated not being able to be up there because he's felt that he has had good nights on the debate stage, that he's seen good boosts of fundraising, and that it's been good exposure. And he said there was a chance another candidate was going to get to have that opportunity being on the stage tonight. But he also said he doesn't feel missing the debate was the mortal blow that he would have thought it would have been 3 to 4 months ago. He again said that he feels good about where they stand in Iowa, and he's ready to keep plugging away on the ground, and he likes the metrics that he sees here. He said that he feels confident that he's going to be back on the stage in January.
Well, a number of candidates who were on the debate stage tonight will be campaigning in Iowa this weekend. What do voters want to hear from them as we get closer to the First in the Nation caucuses?
Just a little over 6 weeks to go before the caucuses, and it's the sprint before Christmas. You'll have former Vice President Biden, Senators Warren and Klobuchar and Mayor Buttigieg here this weekend, along with Senator Booker and Senator Michael Bennet. All have announced trips to the Hawkeye State this weekend. Our poll in November showed about a quarter of Iowa Democrats had made up their minds, essentially, they said, of who they were planning to support. About 60% said probably, but were leaving the door open, and the rest said they were probably going to end up changing their mind at some point. Now, we also polled in that poll, what would it take for you to support another candidate? And it looked at what would it take for you to support some of the top tier candidates, to change your support to Vice President Biden, Senator Sanders, Senator Warren, and Mayor Buttigieg. And the answer each of them got was showing they could beat President Trump. The lists have gotten smaller, Elaine. When you talk to people over the summer, Iowans might have named 6, 7 people who they really liked. Now they tend to name 2, 3, maybe 4 if they're just kind of starting their process, which we are finding a lot of people at events coming out to events for the first time or for second time, just getting their process going, as caucus day is about 46 days away now. But there's one thing that they all say, whether their top issue is healthcare or climate change or education or retirement security or jobs. It's been the same for months. They've said at the end of the day, they plan on supporting whoever the nominee is because they want to find someone who can beat President Trump. And that's what these candidates, you heard them talk a lot about in their closing statements, why they think they are best suited to do that. And you can expect them to bring that message here as they try to convince Iowa Democrats that they are the candidate who can best take on President Trump in the general election next year.
All right, Adam Brewster for us. Adam, thanks as always. Appreciate it. Let's bring back in our panel, Leslie Sanchez and Antjuan Seawright. So let's talk about one of the most tense exchanges of the night, really an extended exchange that drew in actually all of the candidates when the discussion turned to campaign finance. So here's one exchange between Senator Elizabeth Warren and Mayor Pete Buttigieg, and we'll talk about it on the other side.
We made the decision many years ago that rich people in smoke-filled rooms would not pick the next president of the United States. Billionaires in wine caves should not pick the next president of the United States.
Mr. Mayor, your response. According to Forbes magazine, I am literally the only person on this stage who's not a millionaire or a billionaire. So if this is important. This is the problem with issuing purity tests you cannot yourself pass.
All right, so the gloves have clearly come off, Leslie Sanchez. As the Republican at the table here, what did you make of that exchange? This isn't necessarily something we have heard to this degree in a Democratic primary.
No, I mean, you have the younger candidate, the sophomoric approach of saying, you don't want to have a purity test. You want to open all donors up, dialing for dollars. He's in the middle of that process. And people that have been in these campaigns and these fights for a long time on the Democratic Party, and I'll let my Democratic colleagues talk about that, there's always the struggle where they paint the Republicans as the ones who are dialing for those big dollars. They're having those private fundraisers with the billionaires, and they're really buying these elections. And the Democrats tout their impact with small donors and kind of the transparency of that. And they weren't the people in the room with the billionaires, not to this extent. And they drew that line. You certainly saw it with Sanders. You certainly saw it as a big push even before Trump. So to call that out and now lose that as an area that they can stand on as a party collectively, that's a really significant thing. And it's interesting, it's coming from one of the newer kind of the vibrant candidate, the different candidate that's on that stage versus the people who've been in that fight for a long time.
What was your thought on that, Antjuan? Because, this is not necessarily the dynamic that I think Democrats are used to hearing, right? Where you have discussion of wine caves and who...
Why can't I have the billionaire friends, too?
Right, and who's got the billionaire friends and who doesn't, and why or why not that might be appropriate for a Democratic contest.
Invite me to a wine cave, please.
I don't know.
First of all, I think Democrats have to remember this through all things. We're running for our party's nomination, not against each other. And at the end of this process, we all will be on the same team with one common goal. How we get there, we may travel different ways, we may take different methods to get there, but we're all trying to get to the same place in the end. That's number one. Number two, I believe in the big tit concept. I believe in the diversity concept that we preach and teach about. So I'm not going to be hypocritical that you can't have small donors and the Leslie Sanchez of the world who can give larger contributions if needed because you believe in a cause or believe in a candidate. And I think that's where I may differ from my party, and I'm okay with that. And I think that's what Mayor Pete is saying. I think that's what Vice President Biden and some others are saying. And I don't think that Warren, Sanders, or anyone else should criticize other candidates for positions they decide to take. No one asked them to say, we're not going to take certain contributions, we're not going to show up at certain events. And in my mind, that's not going to change the hearts and minds of voters that we have to win over. In fact, I would argue differently. I would argue that the money we turn away perhaps Republicans are going to take that money and use it to defeat us. So it doesn't make sense to me. I think it's counterproductive.
It just seemed, I just thought it was very funny, just as a spectator watching this. This is like one of those popcorn moments, I think, that Caitlin was talking about, because Mayor Pete was ready for that, and he turned it around and he said, you know, you make 100 times more than me, you know, according to Forbes and the billionaires. I'm at the bottom of the bunch. And he's like, but I wouldn't hold it against you if you, making millions of dollars, happen to contribute to my campaign. I mean, if this was a Democratic purity test, I couldn't stand on the same stage as you. I mean, I thought he turned it around well. And for people who don't really understand the dynamics of how this fundraising works, it is very confusing. And I think that one thing is, they were talking a lot about the right to free speech. I mean, giving your money to a cause that you believe in, it's an expression of speech.
It's an expression of speech that the Democrats have wanted to limit when they say that they didn't want to take PAC contributions, that they were looking, you know, with a skepticism at the types of individuals and, you know, grading the individuals that were giving these types of dollars. And it was only Republicans that were doing that, you know, in the back room, smoking cigars, taking these big checks at these $25,000 plate dinners, which, by the way, can we not forget, the last campaign, 2016, that was part of the Bernie Sanders argument, was the Democratic National Committee was kind of, you know, connected money-wise with Hillary Clinton and all those donors and that donor list. So there's some really kind of hurt feelings in that. And the other part, I think we made a little bit of news with Andrew Yang and Ed O'Keefe asking about, you know, opening up to the press his private fundraisers. He's like, sure, social media is allowed. I haven't restricted people. But it's those unguarded moments. There's a lot of reasons members of the press want to be in there. And it just reminds me of the one with Barack Obama when he was talking about Midwestern voters, remember, and he back in his campaign when he said they are bitter, they cling to their guns or religion. And
what about Mitt Romney?
I know you're so quick.
Well,
we have them on both sides. I could think of a particular representative from Virginia who said a few different things too. I mean, there's a long
lot
list
of interesting things that people
that
say
come out as the reporter who's covering those.
And see, for me as a strategist, you know what I care about? Turning people out to the ballot box. And for me,
does this animate people?
No.
When they hear people are clinging to their guns and religion as a pejorative to like.
No, what I'm saying is this discussion that.
Wasn't deplorables? Wasn't that at a fundraiser?
Deplorables.
This discussion that Warren and Pete having about who's giving money and what type of event. At the end of the day, I can't name a voter in South Carolina
that cares about that.
Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania that cares what kind of event you raise money with. In fact, they would probably care more if you don't have the resources to communicate with them about what you're going to do for them if you were elected. So what I care about is winning elections. And we can get caught up on the details and get cute, but getting cute arguably has gotten us to the point where we are now. And getting cute, I think, will dig us in a deeper hole as Democrats of where we need to be. And so I'm not interested in that. We have to get on the same page about winning elections, getting back to the basics. And I think that's the problem we have in our party.
All right, let's go back to the spin room where we are joined by Lynda Tran. She's a CBSN political contributor and Democratic strategist. All right, so Lynda, we have been talking a lot about Mayor Pete Buttigieg. How did he navigate those attacks against him on the stage tonight?
You know, I actually think, depending on how you look at it, he had a pretty good night, because part of the question that people had in their minds was, could he stand up to the attacks? You know, would his youth and his relative inexperience compared to the others end up being a liability for him? And he took the attacks that were lobbed at him. He was able to respond on every front. I don't think that by any means the questions that were raised are going away. But on the other hand, if you're looking at the question of electability, you're looking at somebody who's tough enough to stand toe-to-toe with Donald Trump, he demonstrated that he had that fire in the belly.
All right, Lynda Tran for us. Lynda, thank you so much. Let's go back to the panel. I want to play this exchange that Pete Buttigieg had with Senator Amy Klobuchar, because not to make it all about conflict, but it was fascinating to watch how this dynamic continued to play out throughout the night. So let's go ahead and play that.
And I see what I've done, which is to negotiate 3 farm bills and be someone that actually had major provisions put in those bills. So while you can dismiss committee hearings, I think this experience works. And I have not denigrated your experience as a local official. I have been one. You know, I just think you should respect our experience when you look at how you evaluate someone who can get things done.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Mayor, I'll give you a chance to respond.
You actually did denigrate my experience, Senator, and it was before the break, and I was going to let it go because we got bigger fish to fry here. But you implied
I don't think we have bigger fish to fry than picking a president of the United States.
All right, so Molly Hooper, I'm going to turn to you and ask you about Senator Klobuchar.
Sorry.
So what was your thought as you watched
that was just the
exchange?
beginning.
Right. I mean, that's what I said. As it developed throughout the night, I mean, there were real fireworks there. Senator Klobuchar clearly had a mission to make sure she was part of this conversation.
Well, and she wouldn't let it go.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she just kept going back for more. And I think it seems apparent that there's something about Pete Buttigieg. Amy Klobuchar just gets a little irritated when she has to take on Pete Buttigieg. You know, I've heard from sources that you know, things that he says directed at her, she does not take kindly to. Mm. And I mean, they are both vying for the votes that essentially Joe Biden has to be this more centrist candidate. And Amy, to her credit, Amy Klobuchar has done and passed a lot of laws, right. Not just
which was
bills.
her argument here. That was her experience matters,
and they're bipartisan. She's been able to get Republicans on board, and she's done this on a grand level. Whereas, and maybe Antjuan, you could speak to Pete Buttigieg's experience. I mean, and his experience with the DNC race and whatnot. But she doesn't. It's clear that Amy came loaded debate.
Right. So what I just want to ask you about that really quickly, because it speaks to the question of ambition, right? I think there's a view of Pete Buttigieg that seemed to be implied there with Senator Klobuchar talking about the different path that he took politically in pursuing these political positions. Antjuan, you're giving me a funny look. So.
Yeah, let me paint the picture a different way, because she said it on CNN a couple months ago. There are people like Amy Klobuchar who view Pete's position or his coming to this place he is now as a place of privilege. And I think you kind of heard that tonight when she made the comparison of look at my body of work and look at what you've done, yet that people view us almost in the same category, except you raise more money than me and you have surpassed me in the polls. You're considered a front runner. I'm barely hanging on. And so people are asking the question, why? I mean, when we have the conversation about being a Rhodes Scholar, Cory Booker's a Rhodes Scholar. I mean, there are a million examples we can point to, and some in the media probably have given Pete a different set of treatment than other candidates who have more experiences, have a different body of work. And I think candidates are frustrated by that, and they're wondering, why can't we have the same conversations around our accolades, around our set of experiences? And I think that is the exchange I heard tonight coming from the senator from the great state of Minnesota.
All right, so let's, still along the Pete Buttigieg line here, let's talk about immigration, because I want to play how he handled this question about family separations. Let's listen to that.
I'm the mayor of a city where neighborhoods that were left for dying are now coming back to life, largely because of the contributions, mainly of Latino immigrants. And I've seen those same neighborhoods shut down, families huddling in church, panicking just because of the rumor of an ICE raid. That did not make our country safer.
Could I respond?
I had to look into the eyes of an 8-year-old boy whose father was deported, even though he had nothing so much as a traffic ticket against his name, and try to think of something to tell that boy, because I couldn't tell him what he most wanted to hear, which is just that he was going to have his dad back. How can harming that young man possibly make America safer?
Mr. Mayor,
when I am president, based on those experiences, I will make sure that this is a country of laws and of values. And that means not only ending these unspeakable, cruel practices at the border, but finally and truly fixing the immigration system that has needed a full overhaul since the 1980s.
All right, I'm going to turn to our Republican.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think he just went on and on. There's so much that I wonder if he just doesn't know about the immigration debate. You know, it's one thing to be lauding these kind of things and to look in the sympathetic aspect that he feels for these individuals. And this issue of immigration is very challenging. It's Barack Obama also had the individuals. Hillary Clinton has made remarks about, for example, the Salvadorian children, Central American children that have been coming here that have been very harsh, and the reality of dealing with that. But there was another line where he talked about it allowing for health care, that he wanted to have health care. That's where I thought we were going, health care for all undocumented immigrants.
Right.
And particularly, he was talking about these children. And as sympathetic as people may be about that, people are like, how are you going to pay for it? How are you going to do it when Democrats are the first one to say 4.3 million children in this country, U.S. citizens, do not have access to health care? And where are your priorities as a party? So Republican talking points are going to say, here are the Democrats again, trying to give undocumented immigrants not only citizenship, decriminalizing coming across the border, have open borders, but now let's just give health care, maybe some free college education too. And that wrangles a lot of people. That really upsets a lot of people.
And this is where somebody like an A.B. Klobuchar, who has worked across party lines and across the Capitol, bicameral, where she says, look, do you know how hard it is to get immigration legislation passed? We've been working on it for the past 20 years. Under George W. Bush, they came close. Under Obama, they came close. Republicans and Democrats. It's not as easy as just walking in and pronouncing something, because Obama tried to do it, and Trump just took it back when he became president.
Well, not only that, I think what the great senator she was trying to make before all that is, you can't win a general election with certain talking points like that.
That's ammunition for the Republicans.
In the state of Minnesota, a state that you need to win, that will not work. To win a swing state, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, North Carolina, Florida, that kind of commentary and rhetoric will not fly. In fact, it will end up in every TV ad, every digital ad you can imagine, and that will activate the other side to turn out in greater numbers. So I think the point she was making is a point of political maturity and what it takes to galvanize a base and bring along independents and other voters it takes to put together the right coalition to win an election.
And I just want to say it was important. I was wearing my Amy Klobuchar purple today.
I
was matching my matching outfit. I got the memo in advance. I coordinated because I am such a fangirl of this boss lady. So I know, and I do say that in all sincerity. I think it's extremely difficult to do what she's doing, navigate strong, sound voice, likability. And she has the chops, like she has the political background, successfully being able to do this at a time when nobody can even speak to each other. And that stands out on its own, and I think that's part of her strength. That's part of what she's, kind of emitting as she's been on this road, and she's done it well.
And the thing she has to do, and she's done a good job, she has to continue to make it a day-by-day battle. In fact, I guarantee her prayers, give me this day, my daily bread, so that I can hang on, because the more people hear from her, the more people see her type of campaigning, and the more people hear her political agenda, they see her as someone who can compete anywhere with the chance of winning everywhere. And so this helps her. Tonight helps her. I think she had a hell of a night. I think she put as many points on the political scoreboard as Joe Biden. And I think that means something closing out the year, going into next year.
As you were talking, I was reminded of something Caitlin said earlier in the show about when it came time for that last question about whether you'd ask for forgiveness, that it was the two women, Senator Warren and Senator Klobuchar, who asked for forgiveness.
That's so sad.
So I'm just wondering, and I don't expect, Antjuan, you to have all the answers on this, but is it clear to strategists like yourself what role gender actually plays in the minds of Democratic primary voters in terms of electability, in terms of likability? Is there enough real hard data there? Do we even know what perceptions truly are? Because it's such a tricky thing to talk about and to try and poll on, for instance.
Well, I think, respectfully, the two senators understand kind of the moment we're in. And it's frustrating to me as a man, as a black man, as a minority, to see the two women who are also minorities think that their answer has to be forgiveness. That's frustrating because for every major movement we've had in this country, women have been on the front line right along with men. And so I hope that going forward, they do not have to take that position, but can take another position, because they all have so much to offer to this party, offer to this country. And this party that I love so much is built on the experiences of so many women, including Amy Klobuchar and Elizabeth Warren.
Antjuan is saying a really important part. not also about the forgiveness part, but the reason women have done so extremely well is because they tend to be seen as outsiders because they're not part of the establishment, but they're also consensus builders. So historically, when the country looks like it's in trouble, like there's corruption or people don't trust something, they will either nominate or elect a woman. From my book, You've Come a Long Way, Maybe.
Yes.
You know, I'm thinking
Check
about
it out, everyone.
Check it out, everyone. You know, we interviewed.
It's your gift tonight.
It's my gift tonight. Available on Amazon for Christmas. But we interviewed Democrat and Republican women who were in the trenches trying to run either as campaign operatives or the candidates themselves. And a lot of lessons learned from Hillary Clinton's campaign. A lot of lessons learned from just a lot of female senators.
Nancy Pelosi was the speaker. Then her party lost the majority, and she became the speaker again when they won it back. I mean, who does that?
Right.
And she's been in the middle of all these major fights, the financial bailout. She was around the Iraq War. She has been in the thick of it. And she's come out on the other side.
And you see those two. That's why I'm saying Amy brings that interesting aspect to it, right? Elizabeth Warren, to some extent, she brings this kind of different, fresh. People want the selfie. She's very authentic in what she's talking about. But on the Republican side, not necessarily running right now, but Nikki Haley follows in that same model. She's somebody very strong, very well known for her own record.
Condoleezza Rice.
Condoleezza Rice.
But we still live in a country where a woman has not ascended to be the leader of the free world.
Right, because the executive position is much different than...
As high as Nancy Pelosi has become in this country.
She's trying to get closer with impeachment.
As high as Hillary Clinton may have become, being the first woman nominee for any major party, we still have not put a hole in that glass ceiling. And I think that speaks to possibly why you saw the position that the two female senators on that stage took, because we had the opportunity as a country and as Democrats to have the first woman president in 2016. That did not happen. So there are many things that go through people's mind. I don't know why. What I do know is we have to change the narrative, and that's Democrat or Republican.
Right.
I don't want to make it about my party. It's Democrat
I just
or
wondered
Republican.
if there was, just because they were the Democratic debate.
It's a very unique thing. It's a very unique thing to notice. I think it's an important thing to notice. But there's a lot, too. I mean, from the policy perspective, again, Republicans are going to come back and say this is the same type of debate that we've heard historically. You've got this party that is pulling to the left. It's not allowing any oxygen for this room in the middle. And it's going to be some challenges when you're talking about taking away people's personal health care, raising taxes, opening borders, and so a lot of those things we heard today.
All right. I'm thinking that we are going to get into our final thoughts now as we're entering our final minutes. I'm getting the direction from the floor director. Quick, wrap it up. So, you know, as we look ahead now, people are going to be going to their holiday gatherings. They're going to be maybe talking about politics a little. What are your thoughts coming out of this debate, Antjuan, as a Democratic strategist here, and we look at this Democratic field moving forward?
Number one, as you go into the holiday season, protect your peace at all costs, no matter what. But no, as Democrats, I think we have to really press the pause button for a second, regroup, and figure out what next looks like for us. Because it's going to look different for different people. For candidates who have to focus on their senatorial duties, it's going to look different than the folks who will not. At the end of the day, I think we all have to get back to this notion that we're one band, one sound when this process is over. And people are looking for the answers to the questions they do not have or that did not get answered because of Donald Trump. And we cannot lose sight of that. And if we fail the American people in 2020, we will fail this country for the next 10 years, because whoever wins in 2020 will control the temperature of our politics for the next 10 years.
Okay, I'm being told that we may be getting actually Senator Elizabeth Warren momentarily. Our Ed O'Keefe is just telling us that now as we speak. But quickly, Leslie, from your vantage point as a Republican strategist, we are in the middle of this impeachment situation, which has been put on pause right now. As we look ahead to 2020, what are your thoughts here, closing out the political calendar?
We don't see it's going to have a big impact on the president. Not right now, not in his campaign, not running, other than to activate and raise money. But as the process moves through that first quarter, as people start voting in the Democratic primary, once you get a nominee that it looks more like the nominee, then we're really going to see how that matches up against the president. The president's going to keep talking about his strong economy. And a lot of what we heard tonight is in contrast to that, looking at slower economy, raising taxes, not what they're looking for.
All right, let's go to Ed O'Keefe in the spin room with Senator Elizabeth Warren. Ed?
Elaine, thank you. We're joined by Senator Warren. Good to see you again. Thanks for joining us. Let me ask you this. You clearly provoked one of the more spirited moments of the night. Why did you feel the need to call out that difference between yourself and Mayor Buttigieg when it comes to fundraising especially, but also just sort of your general theory of how a campaign should be run? Why do that?
Look, yesterday, the President of the United States was impeached. And the basic issue is corruption. It's about how he has enriched himself, how he's enriched others, how he's sold ambassadorships. Democrats are going to win when we draw the sharpest distinction between Donald Trump and his corruption that is helping the wealthy and the well-connected, and that we are going to be on the side of the American people. And how do you credibly draw that distinction? Well, for me, it's partly about what you show by the kind of campaign you run. I decided not to do a business as usual campaign. I decided I was going to start this campaign by doing selfies and going to town halls. I've been to 29 states and Puerto Rico, and that's given me a chance to shake hands and get hugs and hear a lot of stories from folks. Other people on that stage have decided that they'll run their campaign by hanging out with wealthy donors who can pay $5,000 and upward in order to take a photograph, to have a conversation, and maybe to be the one who'll be picked to be ambassador. And I get it. In a democracy, everybody has a point of view, everybody gets a vote. But the people who have a lot of money to spend should not be able to drown out the voices of everyone else. And in my campaign, they don't. And in my administration, they won't.
Tactically, though, did you feel the need to do this because he's climbing at a time when your numbers have either sort of stagnated or aren't climbing the way they were just a few months ago?
No, this is about the kind of campaigns we're running. I've called from the very beginning on everyone to fund your campaigns through grassroots. I've said that I don't think billionaires ought to be reaching into their own pockets and buying elections. And I don't think any other Democrat should be making it by sucking up to billionaires. If we want to win this election, we better draw a sharp line between who Donald Trump is, the guy who works for the billionaires and the giant corporations, and who we are, and show people that that's what's really going to matter in their lives. I'm willing to get out there and fight so we can cancel student loan debt, so we can make sure that universal preschool and child care is available, so we can put money into our public schools. Those are things we can do that touch people's lives, but not if we're working for the billionaires.
If a millionaire or a billionaire out there actually wanted to max out to your campaign and donate the $2,800, you okay with them doing that?
Sure. I don't sell access to my time. I did call time recently, and I called a couple of people who had donated $5. I called somebody who donated $20. And this is the moment where I should say, and anybody who wants me to give them a call should go to ElizabethWarren.com and pitch in $5. Because that's how we should be building a grassroots campaign. You don't get to have the special conversation with me behind closed doors just because you're rich. You don't get to have that I'd like to be ambassador because you've promised to gather up $250,000 from a bunch of your wealthy buddies. That's a broken democracy. We need a democracy that's built on everybody has a voice, everybody's part of it. We build a grassroots movement. And here's the thing, we do that, that's how we win.
I don't want to belabor this too much, but in this hall tonight, the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, pointed out that wine cellar that you referenced is a place where many progressive Democrats have gone to hold events like the one Mayor Buttigieg held, but other events as well. And he sort of dismissed it and said, look, you're disparaging California Democrats who have held events at this location. I'm just curious what you would say in response.
Look, it is the case that the mayor said a couple of weeks ago that he was not going to do any closed-door fundraisers. And then he ends up in a wine cave filled with crystals where they're drinking $900 bottles of wine. And at that dinner, the press is locked down. And here's the thing. The American people understand that Washington just keeps working better and better and better for a thinner and thinner slice at the top. We have to make the case credibly that we're not here to work for the billionaires. We're here to work for the people. You know, we decided in this country a long time ago that rich people in smoke-filled rooms were not going to pick our next president. We shouldn't have billionaires in crystal-filled wine caves pick our next president either.
I want to bring our colleague Caitlin Huey-Burns into this conversation as well.
Hi, how are you, Caitlin? Good to see you.
Go ahead, Caitlin.
It was a really interesting exchange at the end of the night, the last question, and about asking for forgiveness. And only the two women on the stage actually asked for forgiveness and said that they would do so. You are the only woman now in the top tier, really, when you look at the polls. Amy Klobuchar also was on stage tonight. But what does that mean to you, first of all? And why do you think it is that the women on the stage felt the need to seek forgiveness?
You know, look, all I can say is I know the kind of race I'm running, and I know the kind of fight I'm fighting. And I realize sometimes I get a little hot when I do it. But it's not because I'm angry at somebody. It's because I'm angry at a system that's broken, a system that's just not working for millions of people across this country. And so if I've gotten too hot, I am sorry. And to me, that's what it takes. You have to be a little self-knowledge about who you are and willing to stand up and own it.
But with Kamala Harris's departure and having, just two women on the stage, and again, just you really at the top of the polls, has it taken on an extra significance in your campaign, being a woman and kind of the historic nature of it?
It sure has. I miss Kamala. And it particularly hit hard that the day that Kamala announced that she had to get out of this race because of money was the same day that a billionaire bought his way onto the stage. Our democracy should not be a democracy of billionaires reaching into their pockets to buy elections. It shouldn't be about people having to fly around the country to suck up to billionaires. Because if that's what picking a Democratic nominee is all about, either one of those, then watch out, because the world's about to get a whole lot better for billionaires. We have a chance to have this different kind of conversation. Kamala was an important part of that. Kirsten Gillibrand was an important part of that. And so just a couple of weeks ago, I lifted up a couple of issues that they have worked on and said, not just that I want to pick those issues up, but I want to give them credit. That this was Kirsten's work, and I'm glad to be part of it. This is about paid family leave, and this is Kamala's work about pre-approval for states that have been trying to undercut Roe versus Wade before they can pass any new laws, and I want to be part of that, but I want to lift up Kamala's voice in it, too.
We understand that you're heading home to Oklahoma in a few days. You are a very progressive senator, presidential candidate. Oklahoma is a very red state, deep red state. What is this homecoming going to be like for you?
Well, I'll be there with my three brothers and my nephews and my nieces and everybody else, and I'll be there to speak at the high school that I went to. But understand, this isn't the first red state I've gone to. I've been to 29 states. I've been to West Virginia, and I've been to Mississippi, and I've been to Alabama. I've gone to Utah, which is not as red as it used to be. And I've been to the red parts of blue states. Because when we talk about corruption, people all across this country get it. When we talk about how we need to make investments, not just in our kids born into privilege, but into all of our kids, people get that. So I had a great event in Kermit, West Virginia. We held it in the firehouse. And Kermit advertised itself as the reddest of the red. But we started out by talking about opioids and talking about how giant corporations were able to get away with promoting a crisis that has taken away brothers and sisters and children and moms and dads, and they did it all for profits. And where was our government? Our government was on the side of the drug manufacturers, not on the side of the people. When I'm president, that stops.
I wanted to ask you, you brought up Mayor Bloomberg. He came up in this conversation. Earlier today, campaigning in Tennessee, made an interesting argument that, actually it wasn't in Tennessee, it was in an interview, suggested that nobody else in the field has as much management experience as he does. Therefore, he's best qualified to be president on day one. Just curious how you would respond to that.
You know, look, I think what people want to know is who you're out there fighting for. Is Mike Bloomberg fighting for himself, or we're going to have a president who's going to be fighting for everyone? But do understand this. I set up an entire agency. President Obama, after we got the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau passed, President Obama asked me to come set it up, and I took that from zero to a fully functioning agency. And here's the thing, when you do something like that, you actually do some good for a lot of people. That little agency has now forced the biggest banks in this country to return more than $12 billion directly to people they cheated. You know, we know how to make government work for the people. We just have to have the will to do it.
To your point about, is he spending his money to his benefit or to other, for other reasons, he also made the point today that he helped pay for the Democratic Party's ability to retake the House last year by donating to Democratic candidates, to the DCCC, to voter mobilization efforts. You know that he has been a top donor to places like the Sierra Club and Moms Demand Action, who are pushing for gun control. So to the charge that he's doing it for himself, he could justifiably turn around and say, I have been donating to various causes that are important to Democrats.
Look, he has made a lot of donations, and I'm sure we're all grateful for that. But understand, I'd like him to pay a 2-cent wealth tax so that we could provide universal child care for every baby in this country, age 0 to 5. That same 2-cent wealth tax would let us cancel student loan debt for 43 million Americans. That same 2-cent wealth tax would let us send every kid who wants an education to technical school, 2-year college, or 4-year college. That 2-cent wealth tax would let us invest $50 billion into historically black colleges and universities. It would let us put $800 billion directly into our public schools. It would let us fully fund IDEA, which means children with disabilities would get the full education they're entitled to. Would let us raise the wages of every child care worker and preschool teacher in America. So thank you for your charitable contributions, Mayor Bloomberg. But please, join me on a 2-cent wealth tax so we can invest in an entire generation.
And finally, we're coming out of impeachment. We're going to come out of the holidays here in the next few days. And many Americans who haven't been paying attention to this election are probably going to start paying attention to it. Where does your campaign go in January, with the obvious caveat that there might be an impeachment trial? And what is your message to those who may now just be tuning in to this campaign?
My message is pretty straightforward. Washington has been working better and better and better for a thinner and thinner slice at the top for decades now. It is the influence of money. We have this amazing chance in 2020 to turn that around and to build a grassroots movement and make this government work, not just for the folks at the top, but make it work for everyone. That's why I'm in this fight, and I think we're going to win it.
All right. Well, happy holidays. Thanks again for stopping by. We appreciate it. And I leave you in the hands of your handlers to figure out where you're going next. Go ahead, Kristen. Elaine, there you go, the senator from Massachusetts, who obviously had a bit of a night. And I think that's it for us from here.
Oh, is it?
I think so. You notice they just cleared out with her.
It's only about, what, 7:38 here on California time?
There you go.
Ed has to be up at 4.
I do have to be early. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we thank you
anyway,
both
Elaine, back
so
to you.
much. Thank you, thank you. Big thanks to our reporters on the ground, Ed O'Keefe, Caitlin Huey-Burns, as well as Lynda Tran. And I want to thank our panel as well, Leslie Sanchez, Molly Hooper, and Antjuan Seawright. You have been watching CBSN's coverage of the 6th Democratic presidential debate. We'll have a full recap of the debate starting at 7 a.m. Eastern on CBSN AM. I'm Elaine Quijano. You're watching CBSN, CBS News, always on.